Tony, thank you very much for putting the time aside, and especially considering we're in the height of lockdown and so forth. It's not easy for any of us, but this is a great opportunity to have a chat with you. To start our conversation, I know there's a lot there with yourself, but can you fill me in on your career, take us back to where it all started and sum up through to today?
Wow, how long have you got? I'm 74. It's been a long time. I started, I guess, in the wine game at 19. So there's a lot to tell. Well, the story is that as a student, I got a passion for France. I really wanted to go there and see Maigret, Brigitte Bardot, and all that sort of thing. I was France then, and I was lucky enough to get a job in a winery in Bordeaux, and it was only washing bottles, but I liked the whole area. I liked the whole attitude, the way of life, winemaking way of life. That's what really hooked me, I think, as much as the wine itself. It was just, I loved the people. And so after uni, I went, and not managing to get a proper job, I went back and, well, that sort of started it. So I went back to washing bottles, but obviously that wasn't going to take me very far. So I did a course at Bordeaux University, and then one day, the guy who, sort of my French father, if you like, the old chap who looked after me, he and his wife took me in and taught me. They fed me, lodged me, and taught me all about wine and French culture and the way of life and food and all that.
Yeah,
it was wonderful. And one day he said, you know, he used to try and get me jobs in Bordeaux, and that didn't work. But one day he said, well, why, if nobody will give you a job, why don't you try selling our wine in the UK? And wow, yes, that could be. So that it started from that.
It's a good step up, having that opportunity to bring somebody's wines over, because I mean, you've had, as you mentioned, such a big impact. Where did it go from there? So you've got your initial, these are the wines I'm going to bring to the UK and to the world in theory. What happened from then?
Well, it was just his wine. It's just one wine.
Yeah.
Well, I put. I prepared a letter with him to potential customers, and and he gave me a box of samples, half bottles, and I came back, and my parents let me stay at home, and I mailed out that letter to about 100 people, well, 100 people. And I got 2 replies, and the letter said, well, can I come and give you a wine tasting of my wine? And 2 people said yes, and I went and gave them tastings. They both bought. It was a pretty small start, but I mean, after a while, it gradually got going, word of mouth, and so on and so forth. And don't forget, back then, wine world was very different. Relatively few people drank wine. There were no wines in supermarkets. Well, in fact, there weren't supermarkets. So there were off licenses, but you know, there was ample opportunity for something new. And my pitch was, these are wines that I bring directly from the producers. The producers, they're authentic. They bottle them, and I just bring them over here. And that was not the case back then. Most wine was bottled in the UK back then, and it changed somehow. So my wines did taste different. My wine did taste different. And you know, then he got a few. He was part of an association in France that were trying to, small producers who were trying to get into the market, which was dominated by big people. and they all thought this might be an idea to get this young chap going round, and they bought me a van.
Okay.
Well, I asked them if they would. Well, you know, and they bought me a Ford Transit, biggish van, and I, instead of just sort of shipping the wine in, I went and got it every month. So I went down to Bordeaux, loaded up, came back, and it was not a very clever commercial idea, but it was a very good idea, because I learned that way. I learned an awful lot. I learned a lot, and I enjoyed doing that. My selling wine door to door is quite hard, as you may know, but it's not easy. But the treat was at the end of the month, well, whoopee, I get on the ferry over to France, down to Bordeaux, load up, and, you know, meet friends, learn it, find out what's going on. Terrific.
You think that gave you a bit of an edge because you were there involved with the vineyards and the people locally?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I came back, I delivered the wine to the customers, and I would quite often they'd say, "Stop, have a cup of tea, and what's it like?" And I would tell them, and they liked that. I got well, like as you said at the beginning, the stories. They like the stories. They like to find out about people, and I got to realise that they're not buying this wine just because they like the taste of it. They're buying it because it's a fascinating story. And in their turn, they can tell that story to their friends when they give them some wine.
And this will help make you memorable, do you think?
Yeah, I think, and it kept the customers kept their loyalty, which is important.
Absolutely. Can you, because I know early on you had a couple of mentors. Can you remember any particular stories, speaking of what you've just said, in terms of in the French vineyard?
Yes. Well, I had a lot of mentors, but the two main ones were Monsieur Cassin, who I met in '65, and he was the one that goaded me into starting the business, and he helped me. He was my French arm. I would get orders for the wines and send them to him, and he'd get it all organised so I could collect when I got down there. He was a much better organizer than I was. And, well, you know, because he was a well-respected chap, I mean, he was a bit ahead of his time. He wasn't just a small wine grower. He had spent most of his life in Africa, in Nigeria, running a big trading company.
Okay, wow.
So he was now semi-retired, but he obviously was a businessman. He knew about business, and he was invited to. When he got back, he was not well. He had a heart problem, but the local wine cooperative in Puissac Saint-Emilion had gone bankrupt, and they asked if he would come and help them out. And he did, and that's the winery I worked in. And he managed to rescue that cooperative by going directly to customers and not buying and not selling everything just to the big merchants in Bordeaux, which is the tradition back then. Yeah. Big merchants, a couple of dozen big merchants in Bordeaux controlled the whole trade. And he was one of the first to break out of that, and he made himself very unpopular. But what he saw me that I could do was more or less continuing that same idea, go direct. And I think he intended that I would sell to shops, restaurants, etc. in the UK. But I preferred to. For some reason, I just decided I just wanted to sell directly to consumers. I thought that would be easier.
Well, you were the first. Well, yeah. I said, well, you were the first, so you had a good way in there. Yes.
Yeah. I think it was something new and original, and that always helps in business, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then also,
I wouldn't try it. I wouldn't figure I could do it again now if I was young again now. Yeah, it's a bit harder now, I think.
Well, and as you said, because you were one of the first, you had the opportunity to bring the wines back direct, forgive me for using that language. But also Monsieur Dubinet, I think, has had another big influence on yourself. Can you remember much about him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he was a lovely man. He was a very erudite, very highly trained enologist. He was. He really knew his stuff. He was Bordeaux trained. He started out his life as a consultant to the top chateaus in Bordeaux, but that wasn't enough for him. He really wanted to go and make a difference and wanted a challenge. So he moved down to the south of France, to Languedoc-Roussillon, and where things were tough. Things were very tough. Then there were constant riots, and nobody was finding it easy to live at all. I mean, they were very poor. And he went around preaching, the only way out of this is we improve the quality of this wine. Because back then, that part of France was known just for what was called then vin ordinaire. It was just the everyday stuff that the French in particular consumed. I think the average was something like 200 litres a year per person.
Okay.
And it was in litre bottles with plastic tops, and there was no future in it. So he persuaded people to try harder, to go back to old ways of making wine, and particularly tried to encourage the vineyards in the higher parts, which were the ones that were suffering the most. And Macération Carbonique he was a big fan of that, a way of making wine that had died out, but made delicious wines.
And what was that?
Macération Carbonique. It's carbonic fermentation. It's it's where the grapes are put into the vats whole, the bunches whole, and the vats are filled with carbon dioxide. So
sorry, carbonic maceration. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, misheard.
So basically, you get a much nice. Well, you get a lovely tasting wine. I started bringing those over, and customers went crazy for them because they were Beaujolais-ish, but better. They were really fruity, lovely, gentle wines, and people went for those. And he agreed to take me on. He took me around this vast region, it's the biggest region in the world, and back then it was 3 times the size it is now.
Okay.
And I just went round with him and visited these 4 producers, and he helped me get some of their wines bottled for me. And nobody was bottling in that part of the world back then. Nobody. It was all bulk wine, and but we got some wines bottled, and after having started in Bordeaux with about half a dozen producers in Bordeaux and around there, Bergerac as well, then I went down to the Midi, and that was a bigger volume. I was, because the wine was cheaper, people really liked it. That grew my business.
Okay.
It got to be big. I couldn't do it all with my one van by that stage. I had to hire trucks.
And eventually own your own trucks.
No.
Oh.
I think we bought a few vans, but no, don't buy trucks.
Oh, sorry.
It's a very specialised business.
I've seen Laithwaites on all the big lorries, so I just presumed that they were yours. Okay.
No, we persuaded them to put our name on the lorries. That was true. That was advertising.
Another key person to your journey has also been your wife, Barbara. She's also very heavily involved in the business, and you've grown together, or rather the business has grown with you both. How important do you think your relationship is, and she has been to the business and yourself?
Check, she's not here. She was cooking here a minute ago. She's gone out.
Okay.
Well, totally important. Absolutely important. I didn't do what this business. It wasn't me. It was a partnership. It really was all the way through. She joined me early on.
Yeah.
We'd met at university. We kind of knew each other, and then after university, we started going out, and she'd come down and see what I was doing in my railway arch, and basically told me I was doing it wrong. And so, of course, I said, well, if you think you're so bloody clever, you come and do it then. And to my amazement, she did. She gave up a very good job. And moved in to the railway arch and worked with me. She looked after the business side. But with stuff which I wasn't very good at. I was hopeless. And she brought discipline, and she also brought sort of strong, firm backbone. She made me do sensible things and not be crazy and do daft things. Well, not so many daft things. So it is a total partnership, absolutely total partnership.
Yeah, but as you say, it's one person's the ideas, the other person's the structure, but it's the coming together of that what works.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
I think I'm very lucky. I've seen other people. There were plenty of other people that started doing what I was doing at the time, but none of them had a Barbara. I think that, and they didn't. It didn't work for them. It didn't. No, it was that. It's that important. Only with her would it work.
I think, as you say, that's the point. It's the both of you making it work. So, and the partnership, as you say. I think another area that's been very key to yourself and Laithwaite's is the Sunday Times Wine Club, which is obviously a big success. Can you tell me how you got involved in that?
Well, yes, it's that was another the bits of luck. I think you say you read my book, I think, and which is the history of our 50 years history book. And there was these strokes of luck I kept having, like just getting this job in France in the first place, and then Monsieur Cassin, he was outstanding, and Dubinet and Barbara, and then the Sunday Times was what took us from being a nice small business. We were quite okay. We didn't earn loads of money or anything, but it was a pleasant business. The Sunday Times published an article, they published several, exposing fraud in the wine trade, which was fairly common back then. This was pre-common market, and the English merchants, the British merchants, had the view that if they wanted to label a wine Pommard or Nuit Saint-Georges, they could do that. They would say to their customers, "This is the Nuit Saint-Georges style, or this is a Pommard style, or this is a Puy-Fumé," without actually having to fetch it from those places. So most wine merchants did it within reason. They didn't exaggerate too much, but some did. And they did this article. On the spur of the moment, probably after too much wine, I wrote a letter to the paper saying, "Dear Sir," letter to the editor, "Dear Sir, thank you for your expose. That really helps us, people like us, small wine merchants. We bring in the real stuff. It's genuine, it's bottled, and it's hard work when you're competing with people who are cheating." And he printed it, and he put our name and address at the bottom of the letter, Railway Arch 36. And we got a huge mailbag. Obviously struck a chord, you know. Because at that time, people, this also coincided this coincided with the cross-channel ferries starting.
Yeah. Okay.
Before this time, if you wanted to go abroad with a car, for example, you had to winch it onto a freighter. Then the roll-on, roll-off ferries came. And so lots of people have been going abroad on holidays, far more than before. And they tasted, obviously they drank the wine and they came back and they bought wine in the UK and it didn't taste the same. So there was an opportunity. So the Sunday Times said, oh, well, really, why don't you do us a reader offer then? So we did. And it went really well. It was really sort of French country wines, so things like Bergerac, Cahors, Corbière, etc. And went phenomenally well. So they said, oh, do another. And we did. And that went in, nearly broke us doing it because we had to do it all by hand. Then the suggestion was made, well, should we start a wine club? Why don't we do a wine club? So we do this sort of thing regularly. And, you know, not just reader offers, but we can organise wine tours, we can organise wine tastings around the country, we can print a little magazine. And they went for it. And so Barbara negotiated a great contract, a fair contract, that you know, basically it was equitable. We were a tiny outfit in a railway arch, and they were the big Times organisation in London, you know, sure. Famous, well famous. So normally you'd think the contract would be in their favour, but Barbara managed to negotiate, so it was balanced, it was fair, and I think that's proved because it's still going, and you know that's a very long time for a joint venture like that. It's coming up for 50 years. Okay. So that did take us from a few hundred customers to thousands of customers. And the growing pains were considerable, but basically we hung on in there and it grew and grew and grew. And that took us into the big time. We quite soon found ourselves to be about the second largest. Yeah, we were the second largest home delivery wine merchant in the country after the Wine Society at that point.
Okay. Would you say that was your game changer moment, as it were?
Yeah. Yes, that was. It was quite stressful, but all of a sudden I carried on, obviously going over in my van, and then I had a Land Rover. I used to go around everywhere, and I set myself to explore every wine region that I could. And all of a sudden, when you start turning up and you say, I'm the Sunday Times Wine Club, it was a different attitude to say, I am Bordeaux Direct. That's the name my company originally had. And yeah. When you go to Burgundy and say you're called Bordeaux Direct, it doesn't go down very well. But Sunday Times, that was very important to us.
And I think, as you said, it was one of the first times it had been done. You're reaching a much wider audience, but also timing was key.
Yes, it was, because the wine club started in 1973, and there was all of us, many more people were beginning to buy and get interested in wine, and it grew and grew and grew and grew. We got to a point of about 15 million turnover. after about 10 years. And so, I mean, it wasn't a flash in the pan. It was a lot, you know, a long, slow burn thing.
It was a keep chipping away, essentially.
Yes, yes. And it was all to do with what kept it going in those days was all this discovering of new wine regions, you know, because people didn't know about funny, you know, out of the way. They didn't know much about Alsace. They didn't know much about all the little wine regions in the Loire. They didn't know about the remoter parts of Spain, and certainly not much about Italy. All that, you know, all this to explore. And of course, that the wine club took as its president Hugh Johnson. They invited him in to be the president of the wine club, and he just published the World Atlas of Wine, which was the first time that any of us had actually seen what the wine world looked like. You know, yeah. We'd read books, but there were no maps worth talking about. All of a sudden, these beautiful maps, and you saw a beautiful map of France, all these little regions, and I went around and ticked them all off. I was like people do that with the Scottish mountains. I did it with every little wine region. I had a fantastic time, and the customers really seemed to like that. You know, they'd ask when I met them, where's the latest place? What's new? You know? So yeah, it was good. And then, but it did sort of get to us after a while. But Barbara was very ill, and I had a heart attack and stuff. And so then we had to sort of bring in professional managers to take over the running of the business. And we still remained in charge. It's still our business. But we had to have people. They did a very good job, it has to be said. They focused on doing what we should do, and it grew from 15 million up to 150 to 300. Again, over a period of 20 years.
It's still a hell of a growth, though.
Yeah, it is. It is. But like you were saying, that was the moment in time to do it, because that was the period when the supermarkets really got into wine. They promoted it hard, and consumption in the whole country shot up.
Yeah.
So we shot up with it. Yeah. We may have shot up faster, but we certainly, I mean, we were definitely on an up escalator at that time. It wasn't a hard time.
You've, going back to your book, which as mentioned was a great read, you've described yourself as having, I'll just get this right, an odd, sideways thinking lateral brain. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, there are these, you know, I used to read about them. It was lateral thinkers. They do exist. They often find jobs in advertising agencies, things like that, because they see new ways of working. And the wine trade is very traditional. And, you know, some of the new ways, well, like deciding to go and get your own wine with a van and bring it back, that was an odd sort of lateral way. Why would you do that? It's more expensive, takes time. Yeah, but it's worth a try, and it worked. There were most people would print in those days. People doing our sort of work print a list of wines and send it out. We did something that looked more like a magazine. We, you know, really talking about the wines and telling the stories. That was unusual. There was the thing that really boosted. One thing that really boosted our sales was what have come to be called wine plans, which is where people sign up for a case every quarter. It's usually, and you know, nobody else was doing that. But why did we start doing it? Well, I don't know. I suppose I took a leaf out of there were book clubs in those days,
Okay.
mail order book clubs, and before Waterstones, if people wanted to broaden their reading, my parents did. Our house was full of books that came from book clubs. So wine, it just seemed to work very well. And nowadays, of course, you've got these sort of arrangements with, you can do it for razor blades, can't you, or underwear. I mean, wine, it's very suited to wine because people, well, it was actually the customers themselves that started it. Some of them said, okay, we like your wine, but it's very confusing. There's so many wines now.
Yeah.
Couldn't you just send us a mixed box every so often? And so that's what we started doing. And we tried very hard with those boxes to make them good value. And that grew us a lot.
As you say, it's a great way to explore wines because it is such a vast field, should we say. There's so much out there, and it's difficult for people to know where to start. But you're providing that curation for them.
Well, I find that, don't you? I mean, you go into the supermarket and you see the wall of wines there. Well, how do you choose? For God's sake! I mean, what have you got to go on? You've got tips from various journalists as to what to try, or you like a pretty label. But on the whole, that's not necessarily the best way to choose a wine.
You've mentioned that one of your greatest honour is the vineyard in the grounds of Windsor. Can you tell me more about that and how it came about?
Yeah, well, I say we started in Windsor, Railway Arch 36, under Windsor Central Station, and that's where my parents lived. Though I'm, we're Northerners really, we're Lancastrian, but Barbara's Scottish. So, but we started in Windsor, and how did it happen? Well, we always kept a shop in Windsor. It moved out of the Railway Arch when they redeveloped, but we bought a shop nearby, and that continued to, they supplied Windsor people, and including people from the castle. Windsor Castle is big, and it's got it's like a small village. A lot of people live in it, and one of them was a guy who ran the military knights, the guys who dress up in red. They're old soldiers, and Sir Michael Hobbs, Major General Sir Michael Hobbs, was a customer, and we messed up his order on one day, and one of our girls, Anne Linda, she went and apologised and tried to she sorted it out and got into conversation with him and told him that we'd planted a vineyard outside our premises in Seal, and we were making sparkling wine there. And then Barbara had gone into business with a friend and planted a vineyard up near where we live here. And Henry, our eldest, had also planted Harrow and Hope Vineyard in Marlow, and that we wondered if we could have it. We were looking for more land, but we couldn't find any locally. The local landowners didn't really want to sell land. Not in our part of the world; it's too valuable. And so Michael said, the castle's got a lot of land. Leave it with me, he said. I'll have a word with himself. And so Anne left it with them, and then she got a call, said, come and have a look. Come and meet the deputy ranger of the Great Park, and see if you can. We'll take you on a tour and see if you can see anywhere you might plant a vineyard, because Prince Philip thinks it might be quite a good idea. And so off we went, and we found this spot It's at the end of the long walk. It's on a little hill, Mezzel Hill, and it runs. There's a lovely slope, south-facing slope, goes down to the Great Meadow Pond. So, you know, which is kind of good for all sorts of reasons. And yeah, they said, okay, well, away you go. We basically, you know, a lot of people say the Queen makes wine. No, it's not that. You know, we lease the land off
Yeah.
the farms, and we did our fourth vineyard there, and we were hopefully getting a bit better at it by then. And well, it you know, it's done very well. But it was due to us all started because we messed up an order. Luck again.
Very true. Very true. So nowadays, as you mentioned, Laithwaite's is very much a family business. What about yourself? So what are you doing now? Because you have taken a step back. You know, you and Barbara. What are you up to?
Oh well, we keep busy. You know, retirement is not what it's cracked up to be. I think my friends of my age are quite envious that I've still got work. I'm still quite involved in writing. I'm not traveling so much, and certainly haven't traveled this year, but you know, I enjoy writing about wine. I enjoy writing to the customers, and I love it when they order the wine. I mean, that's fantastic. It's to write a letter to a few hundred people, and you know, and then they say, okay, we'll have the wine. That's at my age, that's great. You can still do that. Barbara has got her vineyard. She's got a big garden here. She is still she's president of the company. So she's involved in what goes on. We still go to board meetings, but it is by you know, a professional team, and there's some very, very, very good people there now. I mean, we've been going a long time. We've got a fantastic team in pretty much every department. They're very good. They're very, very good. And the boys are now, we've passed on they own the company now mostly, and they are, you know, we didn't know whether they would want to carry on with it. We didn't force them to. And Henry set up his own winery. He's a winemaker. That's what really interests him, is making his sparkling wine. He's absolutely bonkers about that. Will wanted to do beer, and he's got a very successful brewery, Abingdon. Tom went off to Australia. Tom's thing is Australia, and so he set up a winery. Well, he developed our winery out there, Redheads, which was a bit of a crazy thing. Is now not crazy, but very sustainable, you know, eco-friendly winery, and that's his thing. So we're very lucky that, I mean, you know, wine is appealing, and so, you know, none of them ever seem to think of doing anything else other than wine or beer, and they like the, you know, they like it, and they look after it. And so it's hopefully going to last for many more years. We're not we're very firm. We're not selling or anything. Sure. Why would you? This is a lovely business, you know. So
so what about your? Well, I'm definitely picking up on that vibe. You're still heavily involved. What about yourself? You know, what are your future plans?
Stay alive, basically.
Is it still just going to stick with the business, you think? Because, I mean, you're clearly enjoying still being involved.
Yeah. No, I don't have any huge ambitions to start something else. God no. I love this business. I'm very happy with it. I want to help it. I want to do little bits and pieces around places like a garden. I think of it, my garden, I just want to improve. I think we could improve a bit there. We could do a bit here. I think I'm very interested in this whole business of going online. I don't understand perhaps as well as your generation, but I think it's a challenge.
Yeah,
I'm sure the way in which we operate in the future will not be the way we've operated in the past, but I hope the fundamentals will remain the same. We do believe that wine is best made by small craft winemakers, and we must do whatever we can to support them and make sure that sort of thing continues, because there is a tendency for things to go industrial and big, but I think in most people, when it's explained to them, they don't want that really in wine. They might want it in other products, but in wine, no. I think everybody loves the idea of going off and visiting vineyards. I'm sure you see that in what you do. People want to go and visit, and it's great, and that's growing. And you go to Australia, people, and New Zealand, places like that, California, people, huge amounts of people go around visiting vineyards, and they have lunch there, and they taste the wines, and it's great. It's a great life, great way. Agro-tourism, isn't it? It's great.
Well, it's very
so we just want to carry on.
Sorry, yeah,
Sorry?
just saying it's very accessible, and it's good to have people there in the vineyards because it makes it more of an experience for them. They can relate to it.
Oh yeah, and they become friends. We definitely see a hell of a lot of that. We do shows. That's another thing that we started, I think. I don't think there were many shows, but our big London show, Vintage Festival, that's been going since 1980 now, every year, except this year. That's thousands of people come, and it's often the same people. They come back, they come every year, and they come to meet the producers they know and drink and taste the wines that they know, and then they, on their holidays, they often plan to go and visit them, and that's what's going to keep the wine trade going the way I believe it should go. You need small producers who make the best wine because they know their vineyards intimately, and they know what their wine can do, and they have that passion for it. It can be done industrially, but never as good.
I think, as you say, what's important with what you're saying is when people go to the vineyards and they're talking to the winemakers, it is that interaction, and that's where they pick up on the care and attention that the winemakers put into these wines.
Mm.
And as you say, with a lot of the trips that you guys have planned, that will all help keeping it moving forward.
Yeah, I want, we organise lots of visits, and people come to go to properties all the time. And I think once you've been to Monsieur Blanc's vineyard and you've seen him and his wife and the dog, and they've shown you around and explain what they're doing, then you're with them for life, and so it should be.
Yeah.
That's what he needs, and that's good for you too.
Tony, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, thank you for being interested. It's a pleasure. My favourite topic is talking about myself and my wine. So
wine and you.
No, it's great pleasure. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Maybe you get to meet up for real one day.
Absolutely, it'd be a pleasure.
come and see us.